Hi guys, how's it going? This is Daanesh here from GN Tech, and we are here out on a very hot day in Dubai, but we're checking out, we're doing a camera comparison between the 11 Pro Max and the OnePlus 7 Pro. Right now we're shooting from both front cameras where you can check out audio, you can check out video, you can see if these cameras will be good enough for you if you vlog or if you just enjoy recording yourself. The 11 Pro is at 4K 30 while the OnePlus 7 is at 1080p. Now you can see that the OnePlus 7 seems to concentrate way more on the face. There seems to be a much brighter image. But before we talk any more about video, we're going to jump into the primer camera and check out some camera samples. So let's go. If you put the iPhone 11 Pro Max and OnePlus 7 Pro side by side, you wouldn't know there's a huge price difference between the two. They've got pretty similar triple camera setups, and on the front, there is the difference with the OnePlus 7 Pro rocking a pop-up style selfie camera. With the specifications out of the way, let's start taking a look at some samples. The first one was to test out the color science between both phones. The first thing I notice is the vibrant reds and greens on the OnePlus, which makes the picture look better. But in terms of color accuracy, it's with the iPhone. The iPhone is also able to capture more detail in the archway in the background as well as near the chairs and the desks, something the OnePlus cannot do. We'll move next to this sample to test natural depth of field. There's a bit of over-sharpening from OnePlus, but that aside, both phones are holding up pretty well. The background blur to make the tree bark more prominent is about the same, but the iPhone is able to capture the background accurately, whereas the OnePlus darkens a lot of it. This sample is to test dynamic range, where both phones are doing a good job. It's just that with the iPhone's better color processing, it is able to get the edge of the building more accurately. You can also see that the OnePlus struggles with detail on the inner edge of the building. Now it's time to move to zoom. This is taken at 1x and our subject will be the building in the middle. Between these two samples, the iPhone's image is warmer compared to the cooler tones of the OnePlus. It's worth noting that the iPhone sample is the one that is color accurate, but which one you prefer might boil down to personal preference. Going in at 2x zoom, it actually seems to me that the OnePlus is doing a better job with detailing, but that might be the effect of its different color profile. Here's a look at 3x zoom where the OnePlus has the edge, and that is expected considering it does have a dedicated 3x optical lens over the iPhone's 2x lens. But it's interesting at 5x zoom where there isn't a huge difference in the overall quality of the picture, and finally at 10x zoom where again things are pretty similar barring the color differences. Moving over now to portraits, here's a look at a sample in the shade for both. I'd say both phones are producing pretty good images, but I'd have to give it to the OnePlus for that edge processing. The choice between the two samples comes down to the personal preference, with OnePlus image looking fairly natural but the iPhone is more true to life. Something that the iPhone also has is a wide portrait feature, which is great for situations where you need to capture more of the surrounding area, something the OnePlus can't do. We tested the devices in a harsher light to show the phone's processing capabilities here, and the iPhone is holding up quite well. The OnePlus has a bit of trouble for maintaining a natural skin tone, although this sample is not bad by any means. Remember, the phone is almost half the price of the iPhone. There's no discrepancy with edge processing on either phone, but both show this small artifact on the right side, which is not something that was there in the picture originally. Of course, having that wide-angle portrait feature is really helpful in a scenario like this, and it's something I hope OnePlus adds in the future. For portraits of objects, the difference in colors is a bit more pronounced. The iPhone's warmer sample is color accurate and sharper compared to the OnePlus's, but the OnePlus does a better job with edge processing if you look through the links of the chain where the iPhone does not blur this portion out. Here, having the wide portrait feature is useful again, but the iPhone struggled to process the left side of the chain, which means sometimes the software can struggle with more complex objects. Let's move now to testing the ultra-wide lens on both smartphones. The main difference here is the OnePlus's overall sharper photo. The other one is the difference in color profiles, which is more prominent when we shift to the ultra-wide lens. The iPhone portrays the scene far more accurately compared to the OnePlus, but in terms of sharpness, both are almost on par. Now over to front-facing cameras. The detailing is better from the iPhone, but OnePlus has a naturally wider field of view. The iPhone 2 can get this field of view by switching to the wide selfie mode and comparing both these images. I think the difference is down to a very personal preference. With portrait selfies again, I feel the iPhone has sharper details, but the drawback is that it cannot take portraits in the wide angle mode, something the OnePlus is doing. Although in terms of edge detection, the OnePlus struggles a fair bit towards the shoulder and ear region, whereas the iPhone has one blemish on the right side near the ear. To further put the front camera to the test, we tried selfies right against the sun. Here the big difference is in color profiles, where the iPhone is better. There's also a much larger flare on the left on the OnePlus, which may be due to the pop-up camera unit. You can use the wide-angle lens on the iPhone to zoom out, but to be honest, both phones' dynamic range is up there, and if anything in this portrait sample, the OnePlus is better able to retain the blue of the sky, although the iPhone is doing a better job with skin tone processing. Moving indoors, this is using the wide-angle lens on both phones, which tells us that for macros, the OnePlus is more capable. It has the sharper photo and details, but the iPhone's color portrayal is better. Speaking of colors, here's a sample where it really shows the difference. The saturated colors from the OnePlus pop on the screen and look better, but this is not the true-to-life representation, which is what the iPhone went for. Well, that wraps up day samples, and we'll now take a look at nighttime samples. Here's one in a pretty dark environment where without night mode, the iPhone has more details in the background as well as on the subject. This is the same image with night mode enabled, where the enhancement to the background is almost equal, but the way the subject has been handled is better on the iPhone, with the OnePlus almost transforming it to a pinkish color. The night mode on the iPhone has options which lets you decide how long you want to stand still when taking a photo, but all these samples have been taken at the maximum duration just for consistency. But in this sample, I don't have a night sample for the iPhone, and that's because it detected enough light, therefore not requiring the use of night mode. Clearly, the iPhone's image sample is a lot better here, and even with the night mode on the OnePlus, the iPhone is still better. Next, we've got this sample where the lights are better handled on the OnePlus, but there is quite clearly a lack of detail. With night mode, the picture is enhanced, but it looks more natural on the iPhone compared to that on the OnePlus, which has a saturated look, although the difference is pretty marginal. Like we have seen in pitch black conditions, the iPhone's photo for night samples come out looking way better, and with night mode, the difference is highlighted a bit further. But this situation gives us a nice opportunity to test the ultra-wide lens on both phones, where the iPhone has more visible detail while the OnePlus image is dark. Unfortunately, neither phone has night mode support for the ultra-wide lens. Here's a look at selfie samples where the OnePlus softens the image but has better clarity. Using the wide-angle selfie mode, the OnePlus's sample looks the better of the two, and finally, here's a look at night portraits where both phones hold up well. But on the overall, I would still prefer the OnePlus because of its naturally wider field of view for portraits, which could come in handy in group pictures. Now onto videos. Here's a look at 1080p footage where the iPhone has better dynamic range. Stability is pretty similar from both phones when walking, but when running, the iPhone stabilization holds up better than that of the OnePlus. It is also worth pointing out that the iPhone can record video using its wide-angle lens, something that the OnePlus cannot do. Here's 4K video samples from both, where I noticed the cooler tones in the video from the OnePlus, but it crops in a bit more. Quality-wise, the iPhone is superior. Stabilization is just a hint better on the iPhone, and when you transition to running, the iPhone has constant movement, whereas the OnePlus is able to stabilize most of the footage with a jerk every now and then. Once again, you're able to use the ultra-wide lens on the iPhone here to capture more of the surrounding area, which I wish OnePlus was able to do. Both phones can record at 4K 60 frames per second, and here the iPhone stabilization of footage is far better than the OnePlus, which seems to be a major difference between the two. Moving to nighttime video, here's a look at 1080p footage, which is much sharper from the iPhone. There's a constant jitter to the footage from the OnePlus. You can even compare the ultra-wide iPhone video footage to the standard angle footage from the OnePlus, because as I said before, there is no ultra-wide video option on the OnePlus. At 4K, the difference in quality is much greater, and the iPhone is definitely doing the better job. This is to be expected, especially given the price between both these phones. And again, it is possible to use the ultra-wide lens to capture 4K on the iPhone, and here's a side-by-side of how that looks with standard angle 4K video on the OnePlus. So that's about it for this camera comparison between the Apple iPhone 11 Pro Max and OnePlus 7 Pro. Do let us know what you think in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe. Thanks very much for watching, and see you at the next one.